So I think we probably have still more people rolling in, but I feel like let's get ourselves started. I'm using a cough drop so that I don't cough as much. Hopefully that will help and not be annoying for you. So let's get started. We're going to talk about what are you carrying, naming what drains and restores you. And the main goal of this workshop is primarily to help you think about self-care, why self-care is important, and how to begin doing self-care activities that actually help you. So let me tell you a little bit about myself first. So I'm Jeremy Schneider. Obviously, this is me. I'm a licensed master of social work. I'm a master in family therapy. I'm a trauma-informed coach. And I've written a book called Fatherhood in 40 Minute Snapshots. And my memoir, In My Rearview Mirror, is probably going to come out in January of 2026. As you can tell, I do workshops on a variety of topics. I'm also a columnist with Psychology Today, where I really focus on using AI, artificial intelligence, for your mental health. I've created something that's called the Integration Path Framework, and that's focused on the key phases of overcoming trauma. And I've also developed something called the Digital Ally Approach for using AI as a reflective tool. If you haven't already received my guide on self-care, it's free. I hope you will take a time to sign up for it. You just have to put in your email address. You'll be added to my mailing list and you'll get the free guide right away. I'm actually recreating another one that is more comprehensive that will also be free. So if you're on my mailing list, you'll get word. I'll announce that through there, and you'll get word of that as well. So you can kind of get two guides for the free price of one. Um, okay, so that's me. There are two ways that I really like helping people think about why self-care is important. One of them is the backpack theory, and the other one is thinking about what I call soul points. So let's start with the backpack. Think about this. Every day you wake up, you put on a backpack, right? And it's filled with weights, things that you're responsible for, whether that's, work deadlines, family obligations, financial concerns, all the kinds of things that we carry with us that weigh us down. That can be even expectations, it can be emotions that we're not processing. It can certainly be adversity and trauma that we've experienced in our past that we haven't fully resolved. All of those are weights, and those weights essentially get stored in our backpack. As we go about the day, we have these interactions, we have these experiences, and we're adding weights to our backpack. And at the end of the day, we're drained and exhausted because we're holding on these weights, we're carrying these weights. And then we go to sleep and we wake up the next day and we're putting on this heavy backpack again. Self-care is that process of working through what those weights are so they aren't as heavy for us. So, a couple things that I think are really important to understand, and I think a lot of us, particularly in this society, have this perspective, which is, it's not that big of a deal. I can carry it. I can keep going, right? And so it's true. Like if you have 3 pound weights, it's not that big of a deal. But if you have 10 3 pound weights, that's 30 pounds. So these small things that weigh you down, that worry us, that stress us out, right? They still combine together to be heavy for us to carry. And then I think the other thing that people forget about is just because something doesn't weigh a lot doesn't mean that it doesn't affect us. And the best example I've seen of this is if I gave you a glass of water to hold on to for 2 minutes, you'd barely notice. And if you had to hold it for 2 hours, it would start to be uncomfortable for your arm. And if you had to hold it for 2 days, right, you'd be hurting. It would be hard to do that. And it's important to understand that it's not just the big things, let's say things like divorce or abuse or, horrible situations at work where you're getting laid off. Like it's not just those weights, it's all the regular smaller weights that combine together to really take a toll on us. That's really the goal of self-care is to alleviate the collection of those weights so that you can get through your day a little bit easier. So the other way I like to think about it is soul points. And I kind of imagine this as like you're in a video game and you're trying to get like health points. You know what I mean? You're trying to rebuild up your health score or whatever it is, right? So you've got soul points and you can either have them drain from you or you can have them gain for you, right? So you can do activities that restore your soul points and you can do activities that drain your soul points. Some examples, as you can see here, right? A deep conversation, right? I have a conversation with a good friend of mine and we talk for a couple of hours. Like that is restorative, right? I'm feeling better after that call because we have this special connection. Or if I take a walk in nature, I go see a sunset at the beach, right? For me, that's restorative. I feel better after that experience. I have more energy and more resources available to me to just deal with the chaos that we have that is life. Thinking about the opposite, when things drain us, right? That's when we have fights with our partners, or we have a boss that is a perfectionist, or a colleague that's just always saying an inappropriate thing, where we're having social interactions that don't benefit us, that don't help us feel better, but are just exhausting. When we're not getting enough sleep and rest, excuse me, and when we have or feel unrealistic expectations on us about what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to do it. So again, right, we're talking about kind of these two different ways of thinking about why self-care is important because we get affected by the events that happen in our lives, big or small, they impact us. And then what can we do about it? Self-care is that act of beginning to free ourselves from these weights or restoring us so that we feel stronger. So it's partly about finding balance and using self-care to do that. And what I'm going to talk about and what I think is really important is I think there's probably things you're already doing that are self-care actions for yourself that help yourself. We should acknowledge those. We should highlight those, see if those things that you can do more of. But it's also about being more intentional with what you do and what you actually need. So, again, what we're talking about is that ability to take a step back, have some realization that, oh, wait, I am carrying these weights. This is impacting me. This is literally weighing me down or draining me. And then figuring out, okay, well, what can I do about it? And that's the key, right? I think most of us have spent most of our lives feeling like there's not much we can do about the chaos of life. And there may not be much we can do about the chaos of life, but what we can do and what we do have control over is how we respond to the chaos of life, how we process the chaos of life, and whether or not we're taking time for ourselves to give us a chance to heal and rejuvenate. So I wanted to give you an example of this, and I thought it would be a good chance to really sit and talk about some of the exercises that we can do. And the first thing that we're going to do is I'd like to just demonstrate a breathing exercise with you. So I'm giving you three options. If you know of breathing exercises that you want to do on your own, you're welcome to try it. I'm giving you these three options. I always think it's good to have choices. So the first one is what's called like 5-7 breathing. So you inhale for 5 seconds and then you exhale for 7 seconds and you repeat. And the key here is there's something about the process of exhaling longer than we're inhaling that tells our nervous system it's okay. We can calm down. We can relax, that we're safe. So that's one option. Another option is box breathing. And this is kind of exactly what it sounds like. You inhale for 4 seconds, you hold it for 4 seconds, you exhale for 4 seconds, you hold it for 4 seconds. So it's like you're creating a box. And then you would repeat that as well. The third one is the easiest, and uh, frankly, it's one that I like the most, and it's just counting breaths. So you're inhaling, you're exhaling, and in your head, you're counting one. And then you're inhaling and you're exhaling, and you're counting two. And you're inhaling and exhaling and counting three. So what I'd like you to do is we'll take like about a minute to just breathe. Pick which one works for you. And then we'll do that for a minute, and then we'll come back and you can let us know in the chat how that felt for you. Okay. Whichever one you want to do, we can get ready to start it now. So how was that? Hmm. I'm hoping that you can notice in just a minute that you feel your body start to slow down a little bit. And this is a perfect example of the kind of self-care that you can do wherever you are, whenever you are. Standing in line at the supermarket, getting frustrated that the line is too long, just take 30 seconds to breathe, and you'll just feel your entire nervous system slow down a little bit. This is just one tiny little self-care practice, but I hope you can tell that it really is a powerful one. It really makes a difference. So let's do a couple of exercises here. I want to talk about two different ways of thinking about this. If you have something that you can write with and you want to try and do this now, that'd be great. We definitely have time for you to take a few moments and do that. If you'd rather just put it in the chat or just process it on your own, that's totally fine too. But I'm going to go through each one of these. So it's important to really see, hold on one second. Um, Anyone who has raised their hand, I'm sorry, if you could just do that. If you do have something to say, if you could put it in the Q&A for now. I'm still mastering the whole Zoom process here. What feels particularly heavy in your backpack right now? I think one of the things that's really important is to develop an awareness of what does impact you, right? How can we know what we need if we're not aware of how we're feeling and thinking? So, what feels particularly heavy in your backpack right now? So, a good example of that is you're having trouble at work and you find yourself kind of ruminating about it. You kind of can't stop thinking about it, or it just keeps popping up into your head and you're frustrated, right? That's a weight that you're carrying that is really affecting your day-to-day life. And sure, you can wait till it's over and hopefully things will feel better, but why should you have to do that? We could do something about that now, right? Another question is what specific activities or situations have been draining your soul points lately? So, a good example of this is like if you're having conflict with a partner. Let's see, if you're having conflict with a partner, if the two of you are not doing that well, and everything sort of feels not even necessarily bad, but just off, where it doesn't have the smoothness and the kind of naturalness that it's had in the past, and you're just kind of not going so well, right? Those experiences are draining, right? That's your soul points are kind of being wiped away a little bit, particularly because that's an area that probably was more restorative for you, and now all of a sudden it's not. Other situations like that are just either other conversations that you might have if you're having trouble with your kids, certainly family stuff, anything work related. But honestly, life can be like this. The news is chaotic and there's always stuff going on. Maybe that's something that just drains you on a regular basis. As you're beginning to understand what impacts you, it's also really important to figure out what is helping you. So, can you identify three things that reliably give you an emotional boost? So, one example of this, right? For me, I'll just give you some examples for me. For me, I go to the beach and I watch a sunset. I try to do that a few times a week. For me, that's like the ultimate in self-care. I bring a chair, I sit out there, I take some photos, I enjoy the breeze, I watch the clouds. It's a whole experience for me. And 99 times out of 100, I walk out of there feeling much better than when I walked in. Another good example I think we talked about earlier was, having conversations with good friends, but it can also be exercise. It can be anything that where you feel better after doing it. And a lot of the time, these can be things that I like to sort of describe as time that's unencumbered by the wants and needs of others. And what I mean by that is time that's unencumbered by the wants and needs of others. We spend so much of our life dealing with other people and people that want stuff from us or need stuff from us, whether it's partners or bosses or children or other family members, right? There's a very frequently there is a request upon us for our energy and our emotions and our brains, right? And so the things that give us time on our own, where we can look inward and really focus on our own feelings, our own thoughts, our own perspectives, to be able to understand how we're being impacted by the stuff that's going on in our life, that's really a huge key in determining what kinds of things give you an emotional boost? What kind of things are restorative? So, one of my workshops that's coming up, I believe next month, is talking about the two different kinds of self-care. Uh, One of them is regulation, and the other is rejuvenation. And so, I'm going to talk in a lot more detail about those next time, but you can see how you're identifying what is going to rejuvenate you, what is going to help regulate you. And by regulate, I mean like the breathing exercise we did. What's going to help you calm your nervous system? What's going to help you feel safer? What's going to help you feel protected when you feel like there's so much going on that you can't control? Another really important thing to think about when you're assessing your self-care needs is how does your approach to self-care differ when things are going well versus when things are not going well? And it's really important that you understand that self-care is just as important when things are going well as when things are not going well. We need a regular self-care effort. That doesn't mean we need 3 hours a day of doing self-care, right? But we need a regular effort of self-care because we are always carrying weights, right? We are always experiencing things that drain our soul points. So we're always needing to lighten our load, to rejuvenate ourselves. It's just that when we don't, that builds up and it builds up and it builds up. And on those good days, you might not feel it building up. But when you get to those bad days, you're really feeling how much it has built up over time. So, one, right, being able to think about doing some consistent, regular self-care activities to help prevent these the weights from getting too heavy, from your soul points getting too depleted, right? The other is when you are having a rough day or a rough stretch in life, you're going to find that the things that work when you're doing well don't work as well when you are not doing well. And so we'll need to come up with a whole other set of self-care activities to really help you more when you're not feeling well. And so some of that may be, right, like if I'm having a bad week, I may go see a sunset more times than I won't. Or if I'm having a bad week, I may spend more time focusing on something that I know makes me feel better than I might when things are going well. But I think too many people sort of misunderstand that the idea that if we do self-care, it's that's all we need to do, right? But when we're doing self-care when we're doing well is different than when we're doing self-care when we're not doing well. And I'm going to cover that a little bit more in a upcoming slide. And then another thing to think about is the fact that a lot of the things that we carry may not necessarily be ours to carry. And what I mean by that is sometimes we'll meet somebody who has trouble understanding the boundaries of expressing some of the challenges they've been through in life. Uh, what often people call is like trauma dumping, right? If you're having a conversation with someone and all of a sudden they're just dumping trauma on you, that can feel incredibly heavy, but that's not actually your weight to carry. We're just built to be like, oh, okay, you're giving me this. I'll carry it for you. And so sometimes just pausing and being able to realize, oh, wait a second, I'm carrying that weight from someone else. That's not mine, can be really helpful. A boss who's a relatively nice person comes in one day and just starts yelling at you. And you're just like, I think this has to do with you, not with me, right? That takes that weight that they've essentially handed and kind of just puts it down and is like, you know what? I don't have to deal with that. So being able to assess the weights that we're carrying, the challenges that we're facing, and determining what are ours to deal with, because certainly there will be ones that we need to deal with, and what are the ones that actually don't relate to us at all, but are we took them because someone handed them to us. I'm going to pause for a moment, see if there are any questions. I see Sue sent a question in. Is there a line between self-care and avoidance or procrastination? How can you help determine the difference? This is a great question. I love that you brought this up. Part of the challenge is what is the motivation, right? So sometimes we don't want to deal with something and we're like, you know what? We're gonna do some self-care right now and we're gonna avoid that situation. But that doesn't actually make us feel better. That just delays an inevitability because we're going to have to deal with it at some point. So one of the ways to really think about what your motivation is to have that awareness, right? So a good example is, let's say I'm having a rough day and I will just use this as an example. I'm having a rough day and I know that there is a small container of chocolate peanut butter ice cream in my freezer. Sometimes self-care looks like having the small container of peanut butter chocolate ice cream, right? But sometimes it doesn't. And being able to tell like whether I'm having it because I feel this need to have it, or I'm having it because I'm actually going to enjoy this experience and I'd like to have that enjoyable experience. That's how you can start to think about what's the difference between self-care and avoidance or procrastination, right? There are things that we want to do because it's good for us. And there are things that we want to do because we're trying to get out of certain situations. But the only way that we can really determine that difference and that distinction is through self-awareness, is through being able to look inside ourselves, get a sense of, okay, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm thinking, here's my motivation. Now that I know that, I'm going to make a choice as to whether or not that is actually self-care or whether or not I'm trying to get out of something. So I hope that answered your question, Suze. Thank you very much. We are, oh, sorry, one second. So, Maria, how do we tell the difference between enabling others to hand us weights versus others not recognizing appropriate boundaries? That's another good question, and that's a difficult one as well. And so, I mean, I don't have a sense of what the audience is, but if you've ever seen Dirty Dancing, there's a scene in Dirty Dancing where Patrick Swayze and Jennifer Grey are dancing and he's teaching her and he's saying, "This is my dance space, this is your dance space," and that they lock their arms in order to say, "This is the part that I control, that's the part that you control." Most people don't know how to do that, right? They don't know where their boundary really is, which means it falls on us to be hyper aware of where our boundaries are. What is my dance space when I'm dealing with other people? And as I know what my dance space is, it's easier for me to recognize when someone is intruding on my dance space. And that's, I think, what we're talking about, right? Someone hands me a weight from their life, not something that I've done, not something that actually has to do with me. That's theirs. And I can use my boundary to either stop from receiving it or to just take a look and realize, okay, this weight is not mine. This is theirs. I hope that helps, Maria. If not, let me know. We are doing really well on time. So if you have other questions, feel free to ask. I'm going to go on to the next exercise. Again, if this is something you just kind of want to do on your own, or if you just want to visualize it, obviously go ahead. This is a visualization exercise. And it's really trying to get a real sense of like what your backpack looks like, what's inside, what like what does it feel like to you? And doing the same thing with like your soul points meter, right? And I'm not an artist. I can't really draw stick figures. So for me, I verbalize these things. I write these things down because that's easier for me to do. But if you are someone who is more creative arts oriented, this could be a really helpful project because it gives you something to look at when you're trying to kind of understand what's going on. Like, okay, I'm feeling really drained today. I'm feeling really wiped. What's happening? And being able to look at this visualization of your backpack and go, oh, right, right, right. I need to figure out how to lighten this a little bit for myself. Because fundamentally, a large part of the reason that we're so drained at the end of the day is because we're collecting these weights, we're carrying them around, and we're not really doing much to lighten our load. And then we get enough sleep so that we can start the next day and like maybe feel like we can do it. And then by the end of the day, we're dragging because it's still weighing us down. So really focusing on what it looks like, what it feels like. How can you really like help get to know essentially your backpack or soul points meter, whichever one really works best for you, so that it's you're essentially building a relationship with it and it's easier to tap into your sense of awareness of, okay, my backpack feels really heavy today. Let me put it down and see what's inside and figure out what to do about it. Annette has submitted a question. My backpack carries anger and other not so good emotions. These emotions, yeah. So, okay. This is a huge question, Annette, and this is much more than self-care. This is more about dealing with our past, which is actually so if you go to my website, and I'll include the link later on in the slides, but I did a workshop last week about how your past shows up in your present. And I feel like Annette, that might be really helpful for you. I have a recording of it on my website. It's free, so you can take a look and see if it's helpful. But what I think you're talking about is sorry. So one of the things that I think we're talking about is you're talking about the feelings that are associated with difficult experiences, right? Adversity or trauma that you've been through in your life. And you're seeing that as anger or a difficulty to be patient, um, maybe quick to snap, things like that, right? When those of us who have experienced trauma growing up, that's like essentially having an extra 20, 30, 40, 50 pound weight in our backpacks that people who didn't experience trauma don't have to worry about. And so what's really important to think about is you're going to need to do more. Like, you know how earlier I was talking about that when you have bad days, you need to do more self-care. You're going to need to do a heck of a lot more self-care in order to take care of yourself because you're already carrying so much weight. And part of the work that you want to do will be working on some of these experiences that you had to be able to lighten the weight from them. And so, and I'll give you an example. So I had a very difficult childhood, and that's something I've spent a lifetime working on. And I know that I need more self-care than regular people do, you know? And so I build that into my day. And I'm very careful about the kind of self-care work that I do and the kinds of activities that I participate in because I know I'm starting from a bit of a deficit, right? I'm already starting with a backpack that's heavier than most. So, Annette, this, I know it's not like a perfect answer to your question, but I think part of what you really want to be thinking about is addressing how your past shows up in the present, how you can help heal from that, which will then help lighten the load that you're carrying in your backpack, which will make you less intensely angry or upset or negative, etc. I don't mean to make that sound like it's a simple thing because I totally get it's not. I fully understand that. But this is more than just a self-care issue. And I just hope that makes sense for you. Julia asked, do you have any techniques to stop from holding someone else's weight? I'm empathetic and feel for friends and family who are having a tough time and it can weigh me down. Julia, I'm the same way. I totally understand that. And it's like you've got this incredible blessing, and that also can be a curse. And one of the things that you, so in another workshop that I'm doing in a maybe in October, I'm going to talk about the 6 dimensions of self-care. And one of those dimensions is a protective piece, and that's where we're setting boundaries. And I think that whole concept of um, this is my dance space and this is your dance space will be helpful. But I think one of the things that you might want to think about is that you have this gift to help people feel better and to feel connected to them when they're having a good time or when they're having a difficult time. Something's happening that when you walk away from that, you're taking the feeling that you experienced, that you connected to, and you're carrying it as if it's yours. I don't think the person is giving it to you, right? I mean, there are some people that absolutely do that. But for those of us that are really empathetic, it's hard to distinguish our own feelings from other people's feelings. So you may not even notice that you're grabbing those feelings when you, by the time you walk away. And it's not so much a flaw as just a skill that you haven't gotten yet, right? And I think it's can be tricky, and I don't know if this is something that you've thought about, but you don't want to lose your empathy. You don't want to stop being that kind of person. But there is this drain, right? This is that soul points idea, right? It can drain you taking on other people's feelings. And one of the things that you could learn, and it again, it's not as simple as it sounds, but it's absolutely doable, is being able to have an awareness of what are my feelings and what are feelings that I felt from someone else. And I think that's probably what's happening with you, Julia, is that it's hard to make the distinction between, look, this is what they're feeling and I'm connected to that. And then walking away and feeling like, wait, now I feel this way too, but it's not my feeling. So I hope that helps. Certainly, the way I talked about time unencumbered by the wants and needs of others, right? If you take more time for yourself, focus inward, you'll be able to tell the difference between, oh, that's my feeling, that's my emotion, and oh, I absorbed that because I'm so empathetic from my mom or from my sister or whoever it is, right? And you don't have to go and give it back to them, but to be able to make that distinction and go, oh, okay, that's not my problem to have. I'm going to gently put that down and leave it aside. I hope that helps, Julia. Uh, Lucian, I am not sure I understand your question. So if you don't mind following up on that, that would be great. I'd appreciate it. I will keep looking at the other. Oh, look at that. So Miguel asks, what if you feel joy and peace in your backpack one day, but a few hours later you feel kind of stressed and angry? I would say that you're human, and that's pretty normal, right? I mean, I think you may be aware, you may feel joy and peace, but it's also possible that you're still holding some stress and anger, and that something happens that just tilts the balance differently so that joy and peace doesn't feel as strong as anger and stress does. I think it's probably always there. I just don't think that you are as aware of it, probably. And then something happens and it's like the scale, right? Joy and peace, anger and stress. And then more anger and stress gets added and it's like boom, it switches. And so now you're like, wait, now it's all stress and anger, but the joy and peace is still there too. It's just you're kind of consumed by the stress and anger, which is obviously so easy to do. We all do it so frequently. So I hope that helps Miguel. Sam talks about caregiver burden apart from work and household responsibilities. It feels overbearing at times, and part of it is that I do not know how to set boundaries in a household with cultural expectations. So, yeah, I mean, Sam, this is an incredibly difficult situation. This is not, self-care 101, right? Like you're in a very challenging, probably overwhelming, difficult situation. And so the, the skills that you will need to develop have to be at a higher level, right? The concepts are the same, the taking time for yourself, the setting boundaries, all of that kind of stuff, they're similar, but it's like you want to be at the like third level um, skill set instead of the introductory skill set. And that's just time and practice. So, like, therapy can help you with that if, and I'm not trying to pitch myself, but that is a lot of what I do, not the pitching, but the helping people who are trying to build up their self-care and dealing with stressful situations. If that's something you want to talk about, Sam, we can absolutely have that conversation. Julie asks, I think for myself, when I recognize that when I carry someone else's drama, it is because I'm wanting to suffer and be part of that drama. So I think, Julie, what you're talking about has a lot to do probably with, and I talked about it again, I talked about this last week about scripts, about these kind of predefined ways that we respond to life situations. And they're things that we learn as we were growing up. And they're out of our mouths or their behaviors before we even notice them. And that's why I think of them as scripts. It's like you were taught this script as you were growing up. And so when that situation happens, you respond in that way. And the example that I gave last week that is a good one is I went to a florist decades ago at this point. I went to a florist and I wanted to just volunteer. I wanted to learn about arranging flowers. And I wanted to volunteer just for 2 days a week and get a feel for it. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do. And I walked out and I had agreed to working 5 days a week for free for this guy. And I was like, how did this happen? And I don't even really remember being in the room with him. It's just that he was like, this is what I want you to do. And my script was, well, if this is what other wants, then that's what I'm going to do. And it didn't matter what I wanted or what my goals were. That's a really both difficult and good example of a script. And I think, Julie, what's probably happening is you're having these scripts that get triggered by these different situations, and you're acting out of that place. I hope that makes sense. If not, just ask me and let me know. Um, and then, so Lucien brings up a good point, right? That sometimes you feel the weight, but can't connect it to something that happened during the day. And that's okay, right? We don't always have to know where the weight comes from, but just being aware of the weight is enough to be able to allow us to do something about it so that we're not carrying it around. Yes, it would be nice to be able to make the connection. Oh, I'm carrying this because so and so said this in this situation, or because I got this rejection letter from a job that I was really hoping for, right? Whatever it is. But as long as you know what it is, can be connected to that feeling of it and allow yourself to process that feeling, you still can release that weight. Uh, Dom asks, I blame myself and fate for my current situation, especially with decisions made during my younger self. How do I deal with these emotional items in my backpack? So this is one of the things that I talk a lot about, but doesn't really come up that much in this workshop is self-compassion. And I'm doing a workshop on self-compassion in September. And I'll be really diving into the importance of self-compassion. But the reality is none of us are remotely self-compassionate enough with ourselves. And it's one of the most powerful tools that we can begin to develop. There's a lot of research and science behind how therapeutic and mentally healthy it is to be self-compassionate with ourselves, and how instead of making us less focused and less goal-oriented, it actually helps us achieve more because the risks of making a mistake are so much less. So there's a lot of good stuff out there in terms of self-compassion. And it sounds like, Dom, that might be a start, right? There's clearly other issues going on here. There are other things that you're dealing with that are left over from your childhood. But just beginning to think about self-compassion might help at least a little bit. Um, Sorry, Maria asks, I once went to IFS for unburdening after a rough patch, and it felt a lot like being a ringmaster of my own unruly circus. How should our internal dialogue feel? So I'm assuming that Maria, with IFS, she means internal family systems, which I happen to be a huge fan of. So much so that in September, Maria, I'm doing a whole workshop on the basics of internal family systems. And we're going to have a great conversation if you can make that one. It is a bit like being ringmaster of your own unruly circus. That's a fantastic way of describing it. But just for everybody, a real quick explanation of IFS. Internal family systems is the idea that, so family systems is the idea that all families are a system and that they work together as a system. And everyone has their roles to play, and they each play those roles whether they want to or not. That's how a system works. Internal family systems is the idea that we all have these different parts, and these parts inside of us have different roles that they play. And there is our self with a capital S, the sense of like who we really are at our core. And the self's job is to kind of manage, as Maria put it, this unruly circus, is to manage, excuse me, all of these different parts of ourselves and help them relate to each other better, relate to them better, and kind of be what they need us to be. Because a lot of our parts can be younger selves that were hurt, that were injured, that didn't get a chance to really grow, things like that. I'm going way off topic here, so I apologize for that. But that is something I'll be covering in depth next month. Again, that's another free workshop if you want to join in. So I'm just, we've gone through this one. I'm going to go look at the next slide. There's, I think, just two more slides or something, and then we'll go over some information, and then I'll come back to the questions and I'll answer all of the questions that you have, assuming it doesn't take me 10 hours to do so. So I talked a little bit about this, but we won't, there's a myth that self-care is just like this thing that you do, and it's the same thing that you do all the time, no matter what's going on. And that is absolutely not true. Self-care, first of all, needs to be customized to you, and it needs to be based on the idea of what you're experiencing. So when things are going well for me, I won't spend as much time on self-care, but I will still do self-care, right? I'll still go to sunsets, but maybe I decide that tonight I'm not going to go because I'm doing well and I'd rather do this instead. Whereas if I have a bad day, I am much more like I need to go to the beach. I need to watch the sunset. I need that rejuvenation. So again, we talk about self-care during good times and hard times, and also transitions. So the fun thing about self-care during good times is obviously it's more fun, it's more flexible. You can challenge yourself, you can take more risks because you're in a better mental state, right? And you also have a chance to build up your a routine, you can build up your practice so that during those hard times you're better prepared to deal with them. During the hard times, would probably focus more on things like regulation, which is that calming ourselves, the breathing, the meditation, the time unencumbered by the wants and needs of others. Those kinds of things that really get us grounded and more stabilized back to where we are and who we are. Whereas self-care during good times, right, gives us a chance to really kind of stretch the envelope of what we are, and which is exciting and can be a lot of fun and can be really helpful when those difficult times come along. Again, when you're doing self-care during difficult times, you're going to need more time to do that and more activities. So if you're spending even 10 to 15 minutes a day on self-care activities when things are going well, you're probably going to need 2 to 3 times or more that when things aren't going well. And so that I think is important to understand. Too often people are like, well, I'm doing the self-care stuff and it's not helping. It's like, well, but you're going through a difficult time. You actually need more self-care now. And then it's really important, and I touched on this earlier, but self-compassion, right? Not everything that you do for self-care is going to work out, right? Like there's so many variables in terms of how we feel, how we physically feel, emotionally feel, how heavy the backpack is, whatever it is, right? That what I like to tell people is I want you to have a list of activities, a list of self-care activities that you can do that you know help you feel better. Because not every activity will work in every situation, but if you have a list, one of those activities will most likely work in whatever situation you're in. And that's the key. You just want to be able to call upon this portfolio of self-care resources and activities. So being understanding and self-compassionate when it shifts between good times to hard times, and understanding that you're going to need to make some changes and that it's okay and that you're not doing anything wrong. I check in with myself multiple times a day. And again, that's in large part because having grown up in a very difficult experience, I need to do extra self-care. If that's not a concern for you, still checking in once a day is probably a really good idea. Just having some kind of assessment, like we talked about earlier with the questions. And then, you know, just finding new activities that might be helpful for you is always a good thing to kind of just keep doing. You want to keep building that portfolio of options for yourself. So again, and I touched on this a little bit, but self-awareness is the most important thing that you're going to do. And the reason self-awareness is so important is that not only is it good at helping you understand what's affecting you and thus help you understand what you might need, but it is the first step towards transformation. It's the first step towards really changing your life to be the way you want it to be. And with that, I'm going to wrap up. So, first off, I want to say thank you. I hope if you liked it, you will take a moment to rate and review it on Meetup or Eventbrite. I really appreciate that. that would mean a lot to me because I think that's one of the ways that people find these workshops. And I'm honestly, I'm here to help as many people as I can. Here are some of the upcoming workshops, including a couple that I mentioned already. So in 2 weeks, I'm doing the rehearsal room using AI to practice real life interactions. And so in that workshop, I'm going to be working with AI and I'm going to be using it as a way to practice things like boundaries, things like difficult conversations with someone. So I want to help people kind of see the kind of resource that AI can be, and then I'm doing self-compassion on the second week of September. And then the whole you learning to navigate your inner voices, that's the internal family systems workshop that I'm doing at the end of September. And then I have, I believe, 3 workshops scheduled for October, which are on Meetup and on my website. So you can take a look at those as well. Just a reminder, if you want the free self-care guide, you can use this link. It's really just if you go to my website, buildonyourstrengths.com, and then self-care-guide, you can get that. That would be great. Um, and then I just want to let you know if this is something, if you enjoyed this, but you feel like you want a little bit more, I offer what I call 30-minute clarity calls, and they're free. And it's basically a mini session with me. You get to talk about what's on your mind, talk about the things that you'd like to deal with. We'll have an actual mini session. You get a feel for how I work, how what it's like to be with me. You get a sense of kind of what we would focus on. If you'd like to continue, you're more than welcome to hire me. And if you decide that that doesn't work for you, that's totally fine and no hard feelings. But I promise I will not pressure you in any way. And in fact, what I will do is at the end of the conversation, whether or not you say you're interested in working with me, even if you say you're interested in working with me, I will send you an email so that I give you a little bit more time to think about it. And then that way you can respond with any questions. Because I understand that that need to please, that kind of wanting other more important than self is really easy to fall into. And I'd like to prevent that from happening. So I hope that makes sense. All you got to do is go to my website, buildonyourstrengths.com/contact, and there's a button that you can schedule the clarity call with me, and we'll take it from there. Again, I will send this around, so I'm not going to go into this too much at all. Um, and now I'm going to get back to questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And let's see. Oh, good question. So someone asked, can we truly get over our childhood trauma or only learn to manage it? This is such a hard question. I don't believe that we can wipe away childhood trauma as if it didn't happen. It's an injury that we will deal with for the rest of our lives. But the level of impact that that has on us is what we get to decide. And there's a lot of work that we can do focused on understanding how your past impacts your present so that you can then do something about it. Right now, the problem is that you're dealing with a past with experiences that affect you, and you often end up in situations where you don't want to be. You're agreeing to do things that you don't want to do. You're ending up in the same cycle of relationships, or you're constantly working for the same type of boss and having trouble and wanting to get out, right? There's lots of things that we do that are because of the experience that we had growing up. The focus of a lot of the work that I do with clients is recognizing how that plays out and developing the sense of self-awareness and something called metacognition, which is like an even higher level of self-awareness, and being able to realize what's happening, what the experience is, what's going through us, and be able to then make a choice. So too often when we were kids, we didn't really have a choice. We learned to react in a certain way because that's what we had to do. These were people that were close to us, people that we loved, that loved us, that we wanted to love us. Excuse me. And so what we ended up doing was adapting our personality with these scripts that I like to talk about in order to be what they wanted us to be versus to be what we needed to be. We do that without any awareness. So when the work that we do is focusing on building that sense of awareness, so then you have a choice to respond the way that you want to as an adult, not react the way that you have from your sense of childhood. So again, I'm really good at the long answers. So the short answer is we can't truly get over it, but we can significantly minimize its impact on us in our present and future in ways that probably doesn't feel possible right now. Someone asked what you carry you just learn to live with. Well, I think um, that's kind of like a myth of the way we live in our society is that these are things that we just have to deal with. We just have to accept that this is a weight that we're carrying. And I argue that that's not true. We don't have to just accept it. There are lots of things that we can change. And if we can't per se change the weight that we're carrying, we can change the way we deal with that weight and how it affects us. And that's where, again, I keep coming back to that sense of self-awareness is so important. Sam asks, is self-compassion the same as learning to love ourselves, or is that as something different? It's it's definitely similar, but it is different. Self-compassion is the way that it's easiest to think about for people is if you have a good friend who comes over to you and says, "Oh my goodness, you won't believe what I just did. It's so embarrassing." And you say to them, "Oh no, that's not too bad. I wouldn't worry about that. Plus, by tomorrow, everybody's not going to remember anyway." Right? That's compassion. It's easy to do that with other people. It's very difficult sometimes to do that for ourselves. That's separate from loving ourselves, which obviously is important and something we should all strive to do as well. But when it comes to self-compassion, there's a real science and extensive research about the benefits of doing it and how simple it can be to start doing it and what a difference it really makes. Uh, Janet has a question. What do you do when the internal family system isn't working and you're constantly trying and no results? That sounds terribly frustrating, Janet. I definitely don't have enough context to really help you with that, but if you want to talk about it, um, we can do a clarity call over that and we can talk about that if you want. Um, or just follow up with me afterwards and we can see what we can do. Julie asked, I don't ever feel obligated. What I was saying is that, oh, to choose to discuss and focus on what drama because the script entails that drama. Right. I guess so I think what Julie is saying is that she's not she's not acting out of an obligation. She's looking for that sense of drama. And I think that that is a script in the way that I think of it versus like a movie script. But like, I think that there's a part of you, Julie, and I may be wrong, that is so used to a component of drama in interactions and relationships that it feels strangely comfortable, even if as an adult you don't actually enjoy it anymore. And you probably did that because growing up, you kind of learned that was the environment to be in. And this is a good time to take a step back. I know this was a self-care workshop, and we're delving into the more of the past and trauma stuff. But one of the things that I want to talk about is when we're growing up, we learn these skills. Our brain adapts extraordinarily well when we're children. And what I mean by that is if you have a parent that is misogynistic, is all about them, is a very male, it's like women aren't the same, so on and so forth, and you're a daughter growing up in that kind of environment, it's going to be very easy for you to absorb that and believe that and put his needs above your own. And then to grow up in life and do the same thing with partners, where you prioritize their needs over your needs, etc. Now you look at that now and you're like, this does not help me at all. But when you were a kid, it was actually really helpful. It was a protective tool to make a very difficult situation a little bit easier for you to exist in. And that's the real one of the biggest challenges of dealing with our pasts is that it taught us how to be a certain way that as an adult no longer serves us. And in fact, feels a lot like self-sabotage. And it may feel that way now, but it didn't start that way. It started as a way to adapt to a very difficult situation. So that's what I'm saying to you, Julie, is that I'm sensing that there's a part of you, right, that really is used to an element of drama. And so, bam, you kind of keep finding yourself in situations of drama. And I don't think it's because you're bored or because you like causing trouble or anything like that. I think it's because you grew up with that and that feels comfortable in a uncomfortable way. So Janelle asked, will I cover work systems? I'm guessing work systems are similar to family systems. Yes. Uh, I do not really go into that as much, except in terms of how you are able to deal with it, process it, handle it. I hope that makes sense. Excuse me. Excuse me. Clint asks, is internal family systems the same thing as family constellation systems? I think the answer to that is no. I'm not as familiar with family constellation systems. So I'm not that helpful with that question. I apologize. Uh, Clarissa asks, my teenage kids had a hard time. Oh, I'm sorry, after your husband passed away. They are now 20 and 22, doing okay, but I guess a lot of their stuff is also crammed in your backpack. No question. I'm having a hard time standing by as they're struggling and doesn't want my help or opinions. Yeah, I mean, having young adults is very difficult. I'm going to be extremely careful as how I answer this question as I have a young adult who is helping me run this meeting tonight. So I won't say anything that will upset her. But uh, yeah, I mean, the challenge of parenting is that we're constantly trying to take our kids' problems away from them so they don't have to worry about it. And so, yeah, a lot of that is in your backpack. And yes, the loss of your husband is in your backpack. Like that's something that you carry with you and understandable. The challenge of your kids needing help and them not really wanting it. And how do you step back a little bit from that? Um, is complicated and I think depends a lot on the severity of it. If it's not that severe, I think unfortunately we have to stand on the sidelines and remind them that we're there for them, remind them that if they need anything, we're happy to help, but that they're going to want to figure it out on their own. And we just need to be ready for when they turn to us for help. If it's more severe, I think you may want to take a more active role. But again, that's a personal preference thing, obviously. Um, Frankie asks, has been challenging being consistent with self-care, for instance, understanding nutrition and being active. Yeah, I mean, it's of course really hard to be consistent, and that's one of the reasons why I think self-compassion is so important because you know what? I'll give you a really good example. I have not been meditating lately. I cannot seem to get myself to do it, and it's really, really frustrating. And I have not been kind to myself about it. And yesterday, because I use AI as a mental health tool, I talked with one of my AI team members and I was like, this is what I'm doing. And it was basically like, come on, you know it's important. Go sit and do it for 5 minutes. And I went and did it for 10 minutes and I was like, all right. And I forget that that actually feels good. But if I had just kind of let go of some of the beating myself up, I probably would have tried it earlier. And I don't mean that as like beating myself up. I just mean like we all need to be more self-compassionate, right? And there's just no way that you're going to be perfect at self-care because we're not perfect. So the goal is really not to like how do you stay on track, but the goal is whenever you get off track, can you just quickly get yourself back on with no judgment, no recriminations, no nothing, just like, okay, I missed a few days or I missed a week or whatever it is, but I remember now and I'm going to start again. That's really the key there. Uh, Dom asks a question about childhood trauma. Do I understand correctly that we could recognize our triggers, patterns, and manage reactions to these triggers instead of trying to eliminate the triggers or fix the root cause? So, okay, let's talk about this a little bit. One, we don't always have control over the triggers, right? Sometimes triggers are people that we just have to deal with in life. Sometimes triggers are situations that we have no control over. So we can't always get rid of the triggers. So that's part of it. I think when we talk about the root cause, right, the root cause is fundamentally that we were hurt as kids and now we're trying to deal with that. We can't undo what happened to us. We can manage the impact and how it affects us. And that's what I'm talking about. So recognizing our triggers, recognizing the patterns that we fall into, and being able to, and I like to make the distinction between reactions and response, right? So we have these immediate reactions to those types of situations, ones that we learned growing up, ones that even if, excuse me, they may be self-sabotaging, still feel kind of comfortable to us, annoyingly. But when we build our sense of self-awareness, when we understand, okay, I'm about to enter a situation where I may very well get triggered. And the way to deal with that is to be prepared to maybe have something in my hand that helps ground me to the present, that helps me remember it's 2025, right? Because a lot of what's happening is when we get triggered, we're transported back to being a child. That's why, I mean, let's just pause for that for 1 second, right? When we're triggered, we're sent back to being a child. It's not that it kind of reminds us, our brain thinks, oh crap, we are 10 years old again, and thinks, how the hell am I supposed to deal with this situation as a 10-year-old? Because you can't, because you're in an adult situation. That's why our brains get all crazy when we have triggers, because we can't think clearly. It's not a flaw. It's the way our brains work. It's not something wrong with you. So understanding how those triggers affect us can allow us to prepare better. And a big part of that is being able to maintain, to be grounded, not just like being aware where we are, but being aware of what time it is and how old we are, because we forget. And it's really easy to do that. So I hope that clarifies that for you, Dom. Um, I think we covered all the questions. Excuse me. So, if no one else has any questions, I am going to wrap it up. I'll give you a few more seconds to shoot them in. Oh, look, so someone did that. How do you recommend dealing with the parents that trigger us to the childhood trauma? Ugh. I mean, that's extremely hard, right? I mean, I don't want you to think that's something you should just be able to handle. But a lot of it comes from being able, because right now, right, you're probably reacting to what they do that triggers you. And probably that reacting is your brain is like, okay, I'm back to 10 years old. I'm going to react like I'm a 10-year-old. And then it ends, and you're just like, oh my God, this is terrible. I hate myself. Why am I like this? Which adds this whole level of shame to it, which is makes everything more difficult for you, right? It's kind of an ugly cycle. The focus has to be on yourself. That's the only one you can change in this scenario. Learning what are the kinds of triggers there are, how that impacts you, how you can be prepared, how you can do self-care when it's over, all of that kind of stuff that will help make a difference and stop you from re-experiencing that difficult experience. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody, for who's left. I really appreciate it. I Again, I will send around the recording and the slide deck tomorrow, probably late morning. And I will send that via email and I'll post it in Meetup. So hopefully you'll get it one of those ways. But if you don't get it, just reach out to me, please. And yeah, hopefully, I'll see you at a clarity call soon and or I'll see you at a upcoming workshop. But thank you very much and have a great night, everybody. Take care.